Hello and welcome to Off the Beaten Tracks, the answer to every girl's naughtiest dream. I'm going to start today's show off with this band. This is Prototype. They're from Canada, I think Western Canada. This was a 1983 release on Mercury, the Mercury label. The band was formed by Dan Lowe, who'd kicked around a number of bands, not insignificantly Painter and Hammersmith, both other Canadian bands of note. And he also produced this album. This is pretty rough. There you go. And I have not listened to this yet, but I will expound upon it in a future episode. So Dan, after he left this band, went on to invent something called Q-Sound, which is a stereo enhancement software used by the likes of Pink Floyd and Madonna, and they can afford the best. So whatever this was, he probably made a better nickel out of it than he did out of this one album that he produced under Prototype. It's, that big, beaty 80s sound, very Foreigner-esque. There was a top 30 single off this album called Video Kids, which isn't bad. When I first listened to it, I'd been listening to a number of 80s rock bands in a row, and, it started to seem pretty ordinary to me. But I did listen to it a second and third time, and there's a song on the second side called I Want You, which stood out to me, pretty good ballady type thing. I like the entire album better the second time. So I was going to give this a 5. I'm going up to 6, and possibly even higher than that. Who knows if I ever listen to it again. So the cover now is done by a award-winning designer, which I would be hard-pressed to tell you who that was at this second, but it has holes on the back. I guess his idea was if you didn't like the album, you could go bowling with it. So there you have it. There's Prototype with the holes. I'm going to give this a 6. For my next record, I'm going to do this. This is HZ Roundtable, and this is the Bird Bath EP. This was a blind buy. It's an Innovated Records. I think it's self-financed from 1997. I believe these guys are out of Chicago. There's an insert. Here you go, with the lyrics and some stuff, and a post office box in Chicago, which is what I've got to go on. Mark Henning and Tom Banks seem to be the main two guys and songwriters. There's almost nothing on the internet about this EP, though I did manage to find one review that did not like it. It at times sounds like the band is barely playing the same song. The vocals are in that kind of Dave Thomas, Per Ubu style, almost singing the right note, but not quite, just a little bit off. You could just lift it up or down and get it to where it was in tune. I'm going to give this EP a 3. Possibly if there were more songs. Luckily, there's only 6 since it's an EP. If it went to the full, 12 songs, 10 songs, I would probably give it a 2, which I'm going to give the cover a 2 because it's just out of focus, like most of the songs on the album itself. For my next album, I'm going to do John Hollick. This is Rockaholic. I got this off Discogs. It was advertised as a near mint copy, and as with some dealers, I got it home in the mail, and there's a big scratch on side 2, which actually repeats. I'm very, very picky about my stuff. I complained to the guy, and he was nice enough to give it to me for free, which of course I invested in another copy of Rockaholic. So this album, you start listening to it, and it's got one of those voices. He's got one of those voices that bores itself into your head. And why it does that, it's one of those voices where you're listening to it and you go, that sounds like somebody else. And then you spend the entire record trying to figure out who that other person was. After about 2.5 listenings, eventually it started to crystallize. It's Glenn Tilbrook of Squeeze, and possibly a little James Taylor thrown in there. It's a very soft, rocky album. In fact, Rockaholic is a bit misleading because this in no way gets to rockin'. It's that West Coast light pop rock sound. I think if you imagine Squeeze, a cross between Squeeze and Pablo Cruz, you'd have a pretty good idea of what this sounds like. Again, this was his only record. It was pleasant enough pop. I think I would give this a 6 without a scratch, -3 with it. Anyone who's watched this channel knows that I have a real weakness for celebrities who think they can sing, and Richard Chamberlain was no exception in the mid-60s. This is from 1965. This is Theme from Dr. Kildare and Other Favorites. It's on Metro Records. And, Richard has a pleasant enough voice, probably served him well at the bedside of terminally ill patients. He has kind of a dreamy voice, which is very much suited to that Sunday morning record where you're hungover and you really don't want anything that has anything that shrieks out at you at all. This is your baby. I Hadn't Anyone Till You is probably a highlight, though, on this kind of record, you don't have to be that high to be a highlight. It's a Lonesome Old Town, also has merit. And also that has merit is that it's a very short record. There's only 12 minutes on each side, so he really doesn't give you a chance to get bored with his dreamy singing. I'm going to give this a 6, and I'll give the cover even an 8 because I love this kind of cover, and I'm just not going to apologize. Okay, for my last album, I'm going to do Glenda Griffith. And who is Glenda Griffith, you may ask? I didn't know, it was a blind buy, but apparently a lot of people do know who Glenda Griffith is. You read about this album and it's fascinating. It was co-produced by Don Henley. Don Henley also plays drums on this. Don Felder and Joe Walsh play guitar. Carole King plays piano on a couple of the songs and also pens a song for this album called Eagle. Now, Eagle isn't exactly Slapwater Jack, but it's not a bad tune. If that weren't big enough, there's Carla Bonoff on this. Valerie Carter, Denny Korchmar, J.D. Souther, and Waddy Wachtel is on this. Danny O'Keefe is also on this album doing background vocals and wrote 4 songs for Glenda for this album. Who is she and why did she have so many friends and only do 1 album? It's unfathomable to me. So it's very much what you'd think with all those people. It's a very Carole King-y, Jackson Brownie kind of vibe to it. Very West Coast. It leans a little to the country. That country rock with a little bit more country than possibly rock in it. I'm going to give this a 6.5. But, with the talent involved, Glenda should have put out an 11. I mean, this is stocked full of talent. And I just wonder, who is she and how did she know so many people?
Okay.